I came home early that day because the sky was turning black, and I didn't trust the tarp I'd thrown over the shed a couple of weeks ago. Normally, I wouldn't leave work before 5, but I looked at the clouds and thought, I'd better get back and make sure everything's shut tight. It was a Tuesday, I think. Or maybe Wednesday. Doesn't matter. The days blur when you're my age. What I remember is how thick the air felt, like a storm inside my chest before I even pulled into the driveway. I'd been married a long time. You'd get used to a certain routine. You wake up, get your coffee, head out, come home, watch some TV, talk about the news or the grocery list or how the neighbor's dog is digging up the roses again. Little things. Once in a while, you sense a shift, like a radio station that's off by just a hair, the static creeping in. For a few months, I'd felt that static. Couldn't put my finger on it, but she was quieter. She looked at me differently. Or maybe didn't look at me at all. I thought, she's tired, or maybe it's just that we're getting older. I didn't push. You learn not to push when you're a guy my age. It never helps. I remember driving home, noticing the wind picking up. Leaves whipped across the road. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the thump of the tires. There's something about an approaching storm that makes you feel both anxious and calm at the same time, like you're expecting a punch but you don't move out of the way. The only real plan I had was to swing by the house, lock the shed, maybe grab a tarp from the garage if I needed to reinforce anything. Then I'd go inside, maybe have a soda, wait for dinner. She'd probably be reading in the living room or doing some laundry. We didn't have kids in the house anymore. It had been just the two of us for years. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car was parked in its usual spot. Nothing seemed off. The house looked the same, the lawn half dead like every other yard in late summer. But there was this silence, even before I turned off the engine, that made me pause. Normally, you might hear a TV through the window or some music. That day, the only sound was the wind. I sat there for a second, thinking maybe she was taking a nap. Then I grabbed my jacket, walked up the porch steps, and noticed the door was unlocked. That might not seem strange. Plenty of people leave their doors unlocked. But we got used to locking up even when we were home. Old habit, I guess. A small detail, but it stuck in my head. I stepped inside, closed the door, and stood there in the foyer. Right away, something about the air felt wrong. It wasn't just quiet, it was hushed, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I could smell her perfume drifting in a way that didn't match the usual house smell. It was heavier, like it had just been sprayed. And there was another smell, too. A man's cologne I didn't recognize. I didn't call out to her. I just walked through the hallway, my boots squeaking a bit on the floor. Each step felt louder than it should. The living room was empty. Kitchen was empty. Nothing out of place, though the back window was wide open. Curtains shifting in the breeze. My heart started going faster. I remember glancing at the front door, thinking, should I go back outside? Should I knock or something? That sounds stupid, but in that moment, my brain just jammed up. I knew something was off. That cologne smell told me more than I wanted to admit. There was a question pounding inside me. Who's here? But I didn't want to speak it out loud. It felt like if I said anything, it would become real. So I walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. The door was halfway closed. I pushed it gently, and it swung open. That's when I saw him. They were both on the bed, my bed. He was tall, lean, younger than me, maybe mid-30s, I don't know. His hair was damp with sweat. She was there, not under the sheets exactly, more like partially covered, but you could see enough skin to make it obvious. Her eyes snapped up at me. She stopped moving, didn't cover herself, just froze. His shirt was tossed at the foot of the bed. I recognized it because I'd seen him wear it when he worked on our roof last month. He looked at me with wide eyes, then jumped up, grabbed his jeans off the floor. My wife kept staring at me, mouth open like she wanted to say something. She didn't. And me, I just stood there. Felt like a minute, might have been longer. My brain was perfectly blank, except for a hum in my ears. I didn't feel my hands. I didn't feel anything, really. I just stared. The guy mumbled something like, I, but I didn't respond. I watched him shove his legs into the jeans, fumbling with the zipper. Then I turned around and walked out, my footsteps echoing in the hall. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't smash anything. My body was numb. I got in my truck, put the key in the ignition, but didn't start it. I sat there, listening to the engine tick in the silence. The storm still hadn't broken, but it was looming. That hush before the downpour. I could feel the wind pushing against the truck. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, though I tried to keep them still. I thought, what now? Go back in and kill him? Shout at her? Grab the phone? But I couldn't move. After a while, I turned the ignition, reversed out of the driveway, and headed down the road. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't think about it. At some point, I realized I was driving toward work again. I took a left where I usually take a right, ended up behind the warehouse where we keep spare parts and tools. I knew I'd find what I needed there, though I couldn't say exactly what I was planning. I got out of the truck and walked in like a ghost. One of the guys said, "Hey, thought you left early?" I just nodded and kept going. I looked around until I spotted a ladder leaned up against the far wall. A couple of metal canisters. Some old rags. The smell of gasoline. My mind latched onto that smell. Fuel. Fire. Heat. I found 2 empty canisters and filled them with gas from the big drum we use for the mowers and blowers. Nobody said a word to stop me. They know me there. They must have thought I was doing some late job. But I had no job to do, not this kind of job anyway. I also grabbed a small can of lighter fluid and an old funnel. Then I leaned the ladder against the truck bed, pulled a tarp over it so it wouldn't be obvious. I think I was on autopilot. I had some vague plan forming, but I wasn't clear on the details. I just needed to do something, anything, that gave me a sense of control. It must have been about 7 p.m. by then. The wind was howling. Rain spat at the windshield, but the big downpour still held off. I drove to a diner parking lot, just to sit and think. I stared at a neon sign flickering. Open 24 hours. I didn't get out. Couldn't eat. Couldn't drink. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Thoughts kept swirling. Her face, his face, the smell of their sweat, the silence in that bedroom. I must have sat there for over an hour. I kept seeing that damned shirt of his lying at the foot of my bed. I'd signed papers for him a few weeks ago. He'd done our roof, replaced some shingles, sealed up leaks. The way he'd grin at me, say, "No problem, buddy. We'll fix you right up." All friendly. I should have picked up on something. Maybe the glances he gave her. I don't know. Hindsight is a cruel thing. Finally, I started the engine and drove. I knew his address. It was on the paperwork he gave me. A local place on the outskirts of town, near the highway. I didn't go straight there. I drove around in circles, almost waiting for the rain to break. Couldn't focus on the music. The old radio static got on my nerves, so I turned it off. The hum of the tires was my only soundtrack. The more I circled, the clearer I got. I was going to burn that van of his. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was reckless. But in that moment, it felt like the only way to show him this wouldn't slide. My chest felt too tight. I needed to do something. I needed to see something catch fire. When I finally parked a couple of blocks away from his place, it was nearing midnight. The sky was deep black, the clouds heavier than ever. The houses on the street had their lights off. People were asleep or glued to their TVs behind drawn curtains. His van was in the driveway, this battered old work van with a ladder rack on top. I remember stepping out into the wind, feeling my heart thudding in my ears. Rain spattered against my jacket, but still not the real storm. The big one was still holding back, like it was waiting for me to do this. I pulled the canisters from the truck bed, walked quietly down the block, staying close to the shadows of the hedges. My breath felt cold in my throat. Every step seemed louder than it should have been, But no dogs barked, no lights flicked on. I reached the van, crouched behind it, and set the canisters down. I took a moment to look around. No motion, no cars, no porch lights. Then I started pouring gas around the tires, along the sides, across the hood. The smell was overpowering. My hand was steady though. The rage inside me replaced any fear. I doused the ground under the van, too, made sure it was all soaked. Then I checked that the gas wouldn't flow into the street too much. I had a plan to keep the flames contained, at least at first. Next, I pulled out the ladder fluid. Not that I really needed it after all that gasoline, but I wanted to be sure. Quick burn. I circled the van again, then walked over to a small patch of grass by the front fence, poured some gas there, too. I wanted him to see the scorch marks in the morning. I wanted him to know this wasn't random. I paused for a second, thinking, "You're going to regret this. You might go to jail for this." But the thought didn't stop me. I took out a lighter from my pocket. I don't smoke, but I'd grabbed one somewhere along the way. Flipped it once, then again, then tossed it onto the soaked wheel. For a split second, nothing happened. Then whoosh. Flames shot up around the tire, spread across the metal, danced under the van. Heat on my face. The smell of burning chemicals made my eyes water. I stepped back, watched the fire catch. It crawled along the driveway like hungry snakes. Flames licked at the side of the van, the paint starting to bubble. I took a few more steps away, my heart drumming. A light came on in the house next door. I stayed to see the blaze build. The tires popped, loud, like gunshots. The front fence started to catch. I could see a flicker in an upstairs window of his house. Maybe it was him, maybe not. Didn't matter. I wanted him to see. I wanted him to know I was there. And I wanted him to remember what I looked like when I found them. I didn't wait for the sirens. I turned and walked fast, then jogged back to my truck. I drove off, my hands shaking again on the wheel. My mind wasn't blank now. It was full of burning images. The glare of that fire was etched into my eyes. If someone had asked me, "Do you feel better?" I wouldn't have known what to say. But at least I had done something, made my mark. He wasn't going to forget. That was all I was thinking about as I navigated the dark streets. I breathed hard, sweat rolling down my back. I drove with the windows cracked, smelling the faint trace of gasoline on my jacket. It was the smell of a choice I couldn't take back. I didn't go home right away. I parked a few streets over from my place, leaned my seat back, and closed my eyes. Tried to calm my breathing. The storm finally hit, a heavy downpour hammering the roof of the truck. It drowned out every other sound. I thought, at least the rain might keep the fire from spreading too far. But the damage would be done. I felt a small, bitter satisfaction. Then shame. Then anger. It all twisted together until I couldn't tell one from the other. After a while, I drove home. The house was dark. Her car was still in the driveway. I walked in, saw the hallway light was on, the one by the bedroom door. I half expected her to be gone, but she wasn't. I heard her breathing from the other side of the bedroom door. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, listened for a second. Then I let go and went to the couch. I didn't bother taking off my boots. The last thing I remember that night was staring at the ceiling, hearing the rain pound on the roof, smelling the faint traces of gasoline on my clothes, and feeling a sick sense of calm settle in. I guess I slept eventually. In the morning, she was in the kitchen. She had a robe on, hair still damp from a shower. She looked at me, eyes hollow, no tears. I stared back for a second, then turned away. Neither of us said anything. I took a coffee mug from the cabinet, poured some coffee, drank it black. She went to open the fridge, paused, closed it, then stepped aside. We stood on opposite ends of the kitchen like strangers who'd just bumped into each other in a place they didn't belong. I figured she might say something about last night, maybe apologize, maybe scream. But she stayed silent. I drained my coffee, left the mug in the sink, and walked out. That was the last morning we spent under the same roof as husband and wife. if you want to call it that. After that moment, everything was mechanical, like we were just occupying the same house but living different lives. Something died in that bedroom, something broke in me. Maybe in her too. I don't know. I went to work. Didn't speak to anyone. Just did my tasks, answered calls, filled out forms. My boss asked if I was okay. I said, I'm fine. And he knew not to push. By lunchtime, I heard rumors that a house out near the highway had a vehicle fire last night. People said the fire department got there quick, but the van was totaled. Nobody was hurt. No official word on how it started. I kept my face blank, nodded. That's too bad. No one suspected me. As far as they knew, I was a solid guy who never caused trouble. That was the day after I saw him in my bed with my wife. And that was the day I pretended everything was normal, just to keep breathing. I thought that was the end of it. But a day later, his wife called me. I never actually met her, but I recognized her voice from one time she'd phoned to confirm the roofing schedule. She didn't scream or accuse, she just asked, "Was it you?" I held my breath, said nothing. After a moment, she repeated, "I know it was you." Her voice was trembling, but she wasn't crying. I didn't answer. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then I hung up. My hand shook a bit. The phone rang again right away, but I didn't pick up. Let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. That night, I lay on the couch again. I could hear my wife walking around in the bedroom, opening drawers, closing them, but she never approached me. Never asked where I'd gone that night, or what I'd done. I realized she probably knew. She wasn't dumb. Maybe that's why she stayed in the bedroom. Maybe she wanted me to come in and fight. But I didn't. Instead, I waited. Waited for what? I'm not sure. Some sign that the ground wasn't about to drop out from under me. Nothing happened for a few days, and I started to breathe easier. I went to work, came home, repeated. We barely looked at each other. No arguments, no tears. But sometimes, I caught her standing by the window, staring out at nothing. I wondered if she was waiting for him to show up or for the cops, or if she was just empty inside, the same way I felt. Neither of us knew what to do next, or maybe we just didn't have the energy to confront it. So we floated in that silence. A week passed. Then I got home one afternoon and found a small box in the mailbox, no return address. At first, I thought it was some delivery mix-up. But it wasn't taped shut. I opened it right there on the porch and found a phone. A cheap older model I recognized. It was hers, the one she used to keep in the garage for music when she worked on little painting projects. She told me she lost it last year. I'd never thought much of it. Figured it was just gone. But here it was. I pressed the power button. Battery was almost dead, but it lit up. No passcode. That phone didn't have one. I saw messages. Not just from him. There were others, dates, times, short lines like, "Call me later," or, "Tonight?" My thumb started scrolling automatically. I shouldn't have read them. But I did. The timestamps went back months. Then I found a thread from my younger brother. My own brother. The last message said, "You told him yet, or do I have to?" The date was a month ago. That was when I felt my stomach turn to ice. Everything else suddenly made sense in a sickening rush. She'd been seeing multiple men, all behind my back. And one of them was my own blood. I read that line from him 3 times, standing on my porch in the fading daylight. Something snapped. I almost dropped the phone. Then I closed it, put it back in the box, and walked inside, set it on the table. She wasn't home. I went back outside, spat in the grass, and just started walking. I didn't even take my truck. I walked for an hour, ended up at a bar near the highway. I went in, sat down, stared at a TV playing some baseball game. The bartender asked what I wanted. I said, "Nothing." He looked confused, but he let me stay. So I sat there all night, didn't drink a drop, just watched the screen flicker until sunrise. Didn't think about a plan, didn't think about consequences. Just sat in that stale cigarette-smelling air, listening to other people's conversations drift in and out. By morning, my head hurt, and my mouth was dry. I went outside, watched the sun come up over the cars in the lot. I felt a hollow space in my chest. I knew what I had to do next: cut loose and leave. Because there was nothing left to fix. It was all rotted from inside. Maybe I should have confronted her, asked questions, yelled, cried, whatever normal people do. But I had no words left. I'd used them up in my mind, cursing that phone, cursing the day I ever introduced her to my brother. I still couldn't wrap my head around it, but I knew I didn't want to be anywhere near that house anymore. Or near her. Or near him. I headed back, found her car gone, so I took a shower, threw on some clean clothes, and started making calls. Not to friends, not to family. To a realtor. I told them I needed to sell a house, fast, cash deal if possible. No, I didn't care about the details, just get it done. Then I made another call to a guy who owed me a favor. He owned a chunk of land by the old dump. Useless for most people, but I'd seen it once and thought it might be a decent place to put a little shack for fishing weekends. A place no one goes, no one cares about. I asked him if he still had it. He said yes. I told him I'd buy it, no questions asked. He was surprised, tried to talk me out of it, said it was worthless land. I said, "I'll pay your price." She never came home that day, or if she did, I didn't see her. I was out the door, meeting with people, signing papers, making arrangements. I kept everything quiet. By the end of the week, the house was basically on the market. I pretended to do it all normally, forging her signature where I had to, but mostly the house was in my name anyway. She might have been aware, might have guessed, but she didn't fight me on it. We weren't talking. We slept in separate corners of the place. We didn't share meals or words. On the 10th day, I signed the final documents. The buyer was a flipper, some guy looking to fix and resell. Fine with me. I collected my check, stuffed it in the bank, and decided that was the last day I'd set foot in that house. I left a note on the kitchen table, just said, "It's yours now." Not even signed. Then I got in my truck, drove off, and didn't look in the rearview mirror. At the new plot of land near the dump, there's nothing but a chain-link fence and a few scraggly trees. I parked the truck on the dirt patch and stared at the gray horizon. It smelled like rotting trash out there, depending on the wind. But I didn't mind. At least it was mine, and it was empty. Over the next week, I hired a couple of guys, people who don't ask questions, to put up a simple shed, then a slightly bigger one. I told them it was for fishing gear. Nobody cared. I painted the walls white, threw in a cot and a small table. I set up a mini fridge that rattled when it turned on. I slept there on a flimsy mattress on the floor. It felt cold at night, but I was fine with that. I wasn't looking for comfort. Meanwhile, I took her car in for some repairs, dropped it at a junkyard, told them to scrap it. I delayed that for a month, just to watch her search for it, see if she'd show any emotion. She asked me once, "Have you seen my car?" "I can't find it." I shrugged and said, "Maybe it got stolen." She looked at me like she knew I was lying but didn't want to press it. Then one day, she discovered the insurance was cancelled. I'd done that quietly, too. Her credit cards were removed from any accounts I managed. Her phone plan disconnected. I left her the house technically, or at least what might remain of it. But I wasn't on the mortgage with her anymore, so I had no ties there. I had no ties at all. The only loose end was my brother. I wrote him a long letter, about 10 pages, listing out everything I knew. I wasn't yelling in that letter. I just stated facts, what he did, who he did it with, how I found out. I told him he was no longer my brother in my eyes. Then I mailed it to him. Didn't put a return address. I pictured him opening it, reading my plain words on lined paper. Maybe he'd feel ashamed, maybe he wouldn't. Didn't matter. That was the last piece of me I was willing to give. After that, life got quiet. Real quiet. I ate meals out of cans. I stored a few basic groceries in the noisy fridge. I slept on a stiff cot, sometimes just a sleeping bag. At first, I woke up in a sweat, thinking about her, about them. Then I'd wander outside, stand by the fence, and watch the dawn over the mounds of trash. The smell was foul, but I breathed it in like it was cleansing me of everything I'd left behind. Some nights, I'd drive into town, park outside the bar, and just sit in the truck. Didn't go in. Didn't drink. Just watched people come and go, laughing, stumbling. Life went on. I didn't speak to many folks. My phone rang a few times. I never answered. Eventually, people stopped calling. My job let me go, but I had some savings, plus the money from the house. Didn't care about a fancy life anymore. A few months later, I went into a store for a new mattress. Picked the firmest one they had. Hauled it back in my truck, dragged it into the bigger shed. Now I had a bed that didn't sag. It felt too clean in that dusty space. I covered it with an old blanket. Next to it, I placed a wooden crate as a nightstand. Put a lamp on top. That was my one concession to normalcy. I had enough money to live comfortably somewhere else, but I stayed right there, near the dump. I wanted the emptiness, the silence. Sometimes I wonder if she tried to track me down, tried to fix things. But I don't really believe she did. She was free to do whatever she wanted. I was done. I imagined her searching for me a couple times, calling out my name in some deserted parking lot, but those were just fantasies in my head. More likely she carried on, found someone else, or maybe ended up alone. I have no clue. Doesn't matter. I have 2 chairs in that shed. One is where I sit, near the door, so I can watch the wind stir up the dust outside. The other is empty. I keep it there because it felt wrong to have just one. I thought maybe I'd have a visitor someday, but nobody comes. That second chair just stares back at me. Sometimes I look at it and think about the day I caught them, how he looked at me, trying to cover himself with his jeans, eyes full of shock or fear. I remember how she froze, didn't move a muscle. I remember the smell of sweat and perfume and betrayal in that bedroom. And every time I see that empty chair, I feel a knot in my chest, not exactly regret, not exactly pride, just the memory of how it all went down. I sit on my chair with a cup of black coffee in the morning, watch the sun come up over the landfill, and I don't feel much of anything. It's quiet. And I've come to appreciate quiet. No phone ringing, no forced conversations, no lies. I keep telling myself I should tear down the second chair, maybe use it for firewood. But I don't. It stays, a silent reminder. We all carry our own ghosts, I guess. In the end, I'm not proud of what I did, but I remember it all. The stare, the gasoline, the phone with those messages, the silence in the kitchen the next day, the letter I sent to my brother. It's all part of a life I had and left behind. Now I have a mattress, a fridge, 2 chairs, and a view of the old dump. And that's enough for me, for however long I've got left. I'm not looking for forgiveness or companionship. Just living out my days in the kind of quiet that holds you like a cradle and a coffin at the same time. Sometimes, when the wind shifts, I catch a whiff of burning trash, and it reminds me of that van going up in flames. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the truth of what happened. That's all there is to it.